And another English Facebook Live video, an interview today from PSA London. And today I have really the absolute pleasure and honor to have Alan Stevens here.
Thank you very much.
And Alan is really one of the senior in really the best way to term it, senior speakers I have a very high respect on. So everybody knows you, much less people know me, but probably some of my followers don't know you yet. So probably you give a short introduction of what you're speaking on, what you're doing.
Of course. I'm Alan Stevens. My main topic is reputation management. So what I do, I help companies and individuals, high-profile individuals, to manage their reputation through traditional and social media, particularly in terms of crisis management. Wow. So if something goes wrong, I help them make sure their reputation doesn't suffer too much.
Wow. So you help them with the shitstorms.
That's exactly the word that I don't use, but yes.
Sorry, that's in the UK and in the US, don't use the S and F words.
That's exactly what I do. I help them with that storm. Yes.
And what I found extremely interesting today is your keynote today on terms of how do you tell good stories.
That's right.
So what are the secrets? Your experiences say, how do you tell a good story?
Well, the secret of telling a good story, I think, is a story you've experienced yourself, ideally, which has to make a point. And I think a lot of people tell stories, and at the end of it, you're left wondering, what was that about? So you need to tell a story that makes a really good point. You need to make sure that the story is relatable to the audience. So I always say to people, story, point, example.
And are you a friend of really telling what the point is afterwards, or to do it implicitly?
No, explicitly. I would always say to people, you need to be explicit. Even though the point may be obvious, you need to hammer it home at the end, and then most importantly, give the audience an example in their world. The principle that you've explained, so that they really understand what's happening.
I found that interesting. Also, what I found interesting to say, it should probably also, some stories should be deleted. Yes. That was something which I found quite interesting.
Absolutely. Every year, January, which we are now, I say to people, you should be deleting about a third of your stories, or about a third of your content, because audiences change. Funnily enough, I've noticed audiences get younger every year. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And the fact is, they don't remember all of the things that we remember as speakers. So you need to be contemporary. You need to be always looking for new information, new references, new examples, new stories.
And how do you recall all your stories? Do you have a system to collect that, or how do you do that?
I have a system. I use Evernote to collect stories and to recall stories. I have a whole series of notebooks that I use a great deal. I keep some in my head, but most of the time I make sure I write them down or record them. And photographs are these days very good. So I often photograph things and put the photographs on Facebook as an aid memoir, so I can get back to my Facebook photographs, and that will remind me of a story.
And what I found quite interesting is you talked about also the emotional side of stories, that you're recording them. Could you give us some?
So when I'm recording a story, if something just happened, I don't just record what happened, the sequence of events. I record how I felt about that, and also how I think other people who were involved felt about that. Because when you're a storyteller, you need to touch the emotions of your audience. So you need to record the emotions you feel at the time, so you can express them again.
Absolutely brilliant. And is there a kind of generic structure of stories you recommend?
The generic structure is the hero's journey, where you have a protagonist, a hero, an obstacle to overcome, and a pot of gold, something they achieve, which helps them to transform in some way. Classic film structure. But you can do stories in various ways. Sometimes you can start a story at the end. You can tell them what happened, now how do we get here? Or you can start a story at the most exciting incident. This is the thing that happened. How did that happen, and what did that lead to? So I'm a great fan of not necessarily doing a linear structure, not starting at the beginning and ending at the end, but mixing that around a little bit. It makes the story far more interesting.
That's cool. And you already talked about how you're using technology with Evernote, for example.
That's right.
Do you also use kind of like the iPad or the PC on stage, or are you more a friend of telling it without any slides, without technology?
I tend not to use slides, but as you know, I'm a huge fan of the iPad, as we both are.
A bit of a similarity.
And therefore, I do use iPad apps, but mostly I tend to create stories in people's heads. Yeah. And I think I do use one or two images, which again I'm going to use from the iPad quite often, but the best images you could ever create are the ones that you create in somebody else's head. They're the ones they're going to remember.
Super. I think there's nothing more to add to that. I will definitely put your links of your webpage to that. I'm looking forward to being part of your masterclass. So absolutely looking forward to see you at the pub now and later on. Absolutely. Have a great weekend. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you very much.